Terri, thanks so much for joining me. I'm going to start off this conversation by asking you something that I ask every guest that appears on Spolitics, and that is name an athlete or a moment that made you love sports.
Wow. An athlete or a moment. Althea Gibson. I got my first tennis racket when I was probably about 7 years old, 8 years old. And seeing her, um, knowing, what a great legend she was in that sport, and that she looked like me, meant everything. And we had courts up the street from the house. So, yeah, that was definitely it. Great question.
Yeah, well, I always feel the one thing sometimes that we forget about in sports, or we don't forget, but that we should remind ourselves in sports, is that most of us love sports because it was fun. It was something that connected us. So I asked that question because it's a way of sort of remembering what is the emotional trigger that connected us to all, loving this game. Now, in your current role with the WNBA, you're on a much different side of things than what a coach or a player or even just being a fan, although you obviously are a fan of the game. As executive director of the WNBA's Players Association, you've been in this role since 2016. How did you wind up in this position?
Oh, great question. The short answer is I responded to an email. I
Hmm.
was working for the NCAA. I was the director of governance, and I got an email, and it had the job announcement for this position. And I was in the midst of preparing for the NCAA convention, and I ignored the email. Honestly, I was like, I don't have time for this. I got other things to do, and so I I ignored it for a couple of weeks. Somebody pinged me back and said, "Hey, did you ever look at that email?" I looked at the email and I said, "Oh my God!" And I just kind of reflected in that moment about all that I had been doing. I had um, researched Title IX and taught a class called Women in Sport. I was working for the NCAA. I'm just passionate about women's sports and passionate about the ability to advocate for them. And just seeing my career, I thought, wow, maybe I had been preparing for this moment, for this opportunity, and I didn't even know it. So, clicked on that job announcement and told the person who called me and said, read the email. I said, I got to call you back. And then just kind of went into war mode, honestly, because I was preparing for this job that I thought was a dream job. And I was right.
Women's sports, you've seen how much it's, evolved. And when you think about where women's sports overall, not just in the WNBA, are in this moment, what's sort of your perspective on what appears to be another explosion? I like to use the word another because we've seen similar explosions before. But what makes this moment in women's sports a lot different?
What makes this moment different is that folks are paying attention. Folks are dialed in. They have access, to the games, to the players. There's finally storytelling around the players. I think it's the job of the league and the teams to do it. I think it's the job of the union to do it, to promote and support our members. And I think we're doing a much better job of it. You see that there is a business that is solidly wrapped around these players, in building this brand. And I think there are so many partners out there who are looking at women's sports as, wow, this is the new frontier. There's a new opportunity here. Like I said, folks are paying attention, and there's excitement with that paying attention. I think we're also kind of connecting the dots of the fandom from the grassroots sports through high school years, through the college years, until the and the Olympics, and then playing overseas. Like, we finally have gotten it right on how to talk about women's sports and the business of women's sports. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so I think it's important and intentional that you use the language, the business of women's sports, because this is the first year in women's sports that women's sports will generate $1 billion in revenue. What does that say about women's sports and how it's being looked at now versus how it used to be looked at in the past, simply from a business perspective?
It's just what you said, and it's the reason why the players opted out this year. I mean, their mantra was, it's business. We've got to be about the business of building this sport, of building this game, and not looking at it like, oh, it's a good thing to support, oh, it's charity, or oh, like, create an intentional plan around this and watch the opportunities just skyrocket. It's just that simple, Jamel.
So you brought up the WNBA players have decided that they wanted to opt out of their current collective bargaining agreement. Um, what was the impetus behind deciding to opt out?
Yeah. So many people around the game, around sport, thought it was a no brainer that the players were going to vote to opt out. And it's really kind of interesting because if you go back to when I first started in this role and we were, preparing for what might be, the first opt out back in 2018 to negotiate this 2020 CBA, there were so many people who were panicked. Oh, the players can't opt out. They're going to break the league. The league's going to fold. And, oh, woe is me. They were running around like Chicken Little. It was so funny. And so now, everybody was in a complete opposite mode. Oh, of course the players are going to opt out. And what I told the players every single time we met, this is not an of course. I'm not assuming that you are going to vote to opt out. What we're going to do is the work to arrive at whatever conclusion you arrive at, because it's their decision, right? And I've got to execute on that. And it was about building a group of core advisors, having lots and lots of CBA meetings with our CBA committee every month, maybe even a couple times a month, reviewing the league and team documents, their financials, to understand the business, where it has been and how it's grown since this under the 2020 CBA, where we are in this moment, and then what the future could look like. And it's a lot of conversations. And the decision to opt out, again, it wasn't an automatic, but it was a two-pronged decision. You could stay in this CBA and potentially begin to fall behind, or you can opt out. And if you're voting to opt out, we told the players, if you're voting to opt out, you're also voting to stay in the negotiations for as long as it takes, because this set of negotiations are going to be very different from the last time. This is absolutely going to be about a fight. And if you have the resolve and the commitment, then vote to opt out. If you're not sure about that, then perhaps you're staying in this CBA, in the current one.
So why are I know all labor negotiations, particularly when it comes to sports leagues and owners, there's always a fight. That's just the nature of how they go. But why do you anticipate that at this particular moment, I saw some comments you made before where you referred to it as there's going to be some hard conversations. Why are you anticipating that this could, I don't want to say get ugly, but maybe approach getting ugly?
Yeah, well, first of all, Jemele, I wanted them to realize this was going to be different than last time. Last time there was so much to talk about, so much on the table, so much to fix. And there were so many opportunities we saw last time that we knew the league and team saw as an opportunity to come to the table and fix too. This time, there are dollars, real dollars, lots of dollars involved. And this time, what we're talking about is being transformational. That was NECA's word at the beginning of the season. And I'm glad to hear from the league commissioner. She uses it every now and then. And I said, well, that's great. They've adopted our language. Very good. Very good. Perhaps, we will have the same goals in mind. We may kind of arrive at them differently, or look to arrive at them differently. But Jemele, we recognize that when there's a lot of money involved and flowing through this business, when there's lots of opportunities to impact the players, we can come together and do the right thing, and make transformational our common goal, or we can fight. And the players understand who they have in an executive director like me. I prepare them for worst case scenarios. So I'm going to prepare them for the fight.
Uh, Now, some people will look at the decision to opt out as too soon, as you sort of mentioned that there was a report that there are NBA owners, because there are still some NBA owners who are owners of WNBA teams. Although I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that number has dwindled a lot compared to when the league first began, where all NBA owners owned a WNBA team. And now maybe it's half, I think, maybe.
Yeah, but it's gone back up again, right? Because we have the team that's coming in the Bay. So we have
Oh,
team number
right.
13.
That's right. Yeah, they decided that they wanted in. Probably a lot of what you said, where there is some real money in this now. So it's really become such an attractive financial option. But nevertheless, there was a report that said that NBA owners were not happy because the league will lose money again this year. I think about $40 million, and they weren't happy about the league losses. So people see that report, they see you're opting out, and they say, "Well, if you're losing money, why are you opting out?" Sort of walk us through why 1 + 1 doesn't quite equal 2.
Yeah. Do you see me smiling? Do you see me
Yeah, I
smiling at
do.
the
I see you're ready for
question?
this one.
Yeah, yeah, I am ready for this question. And I'm ready for this question because it's their playbook, right? In anticipation that the players may indeed vote to opt out of the CBA, it seems like, they resorted to their own playbook. Oh, the league is losing money. And it kind of makes me smile, makes me chuckle, because I think a couple things. I think you can't have it both ways. You can't say the W is a winning proposition because clearly it is, and then say, oh, but we're losing money. You just can't have it both ways. But when you think about it, I guess my response is two things. One, why? Why is the league losing money? Because it's certainly not because of the players. We're in a hard cap system. Their salaries are fixed. You're certainly not paying them more. They're not benefiting in the growth in the revenue. So it's not about the players. But two, my other reaction to it is, so what? Maybe you've lost money this year, but so what? You're not looking to what the future holds. And clearly, your set of advisors, like our set of advisors, have looked at the growth over the last few years, have looked at this moment and looked to the future and know what's ahead. And so it's just funny. They resorted to their old playbook. We knew it was happening, or going to happen. Kind of shame on them though, right? Because when you look at this CBA, when you look at the growth, when you look at expansion, I think the league and the teams, if you pull them aside and you get them to speak honestly to you, they'll say, we're happy the players opted out. We look forward to this new set of discussions, kind of, sort of, but we're happy that they opted out because nobody was going to win, quite honestly, under this new CBA.
And to give people out there listening some context, when you refer to old playbook, that and I know you know this, is that the NBA owners do the same thing. And I remember in '99 when the NBA players were on strike, they came forth with data that showed practically every team in the NBA was losing money, and how could the players possibly, opt out, and it was being unfair, and we see how that
And
turned out.
they don't even do the right math. First of all,
No, they don't.
NBA
They do not.
NBA owners do this, NFL owners do it. Like, it's common across sports, right? Like, if there's
It is very
anything
common.
that's coming close to, CBA discussions and opt out or whatever it is, suddenly they're going to cry broke. But they don't do the honest math. Look at the valuation of the franchises. That's where they make their money. And that's why they're not crying or losing any sleep over, some losses that may have happened this year. I'm not going to suggest that they are not sustaining any losses, but I am going to say, when you look at the overall model, that's not what this is about. They're doing well. And nobody, how old is the W? Nobody stays in business for darn near 30 years if you're losing money.
Yeah,
Everybody
and,
knows
and
that.
and just so people again who are listening understand that, is that you have multiple franchises in the WNBA whose valuations are, in three digits solidly. So it's like and then the prediction of what it costs now to get in and to buy a WNBA team is so much bigger than when the league started. So clearly there is growth happening, and financial growth, on top of
Absolutely.
that. So, sort of another issue is that, and not necessarily an issue, but I'm just talking about narratives, because I think this is a good opportunity to sort of debunk or at least expand on some narratives that are out there. When people hear WNBA players talking about that they want to make more money, immediately, of course, they throw in their face, how much money do you bring in and all the revenue? And I often like to counter with that and say, do you know that the NBA used to lose a lot of money? And that didn't stop them from investing in the players, right? But nevertheless, the WNBA, at least from my understanding, and I've seen players say this, but you can lay this out way more expertly than I can, is they're not asking necessarily to make the same as LeBron James. Like, they very much understand that the NBA and the WNBA are in much different financial positions. What they are asking for is more of what they're bringing in. So can you sort of explain how that narrative gets kind of lost, about what the WNBA players are asking for in terms of salary?
Yes. First of all, I'm going to say this again. It's business. It's business. That's the frame of mind. That's the approach of our members. And I'm just so proud of them for how they think about their sport and think about their value in their sport. When you look, I keep talking about the salary cap, right? We're in a hard cap system, very few exceptions. And so if we can talk a little bit about this, and hopefully it'll come across as we walk through it. If we're in a hard cap system with this salary cap that we have right now, back before when we opted out back in 2019, let's look at the salary cap there. It was under $1 million. So each team had 990 something thousand dollars to spend on salaries across 12 players. They really only hold about 10 or 11 players on a roster, but that's what they have. It's a fixed pot of money. That grew a little bit. That went to 1.3 in 2020, and it's grown ever since. But it only grows not based on the revenue that's coming in. It only grows on just a fixed percentage, 3% increase annually. That's not a lot of money. That's not a lot of money. And so when you look at the total salaries, if you look at the total salaries back in, I don't know, 2023, it was probably somewhere around $17 million. That is only 8% of the total gross revenue for the business, for the league and the teams. So I'm trying to say this as simply as possible and do simple math and simple numbers, but it's really spot on. Like, when you understand it in that way, the players are saying, we want a fair share of the pie. And being in this hard cap system that we're in right now, it doesn't allow us that fair share of the pie. And it doesn't allow us, the players, to benefit from the growth of the business in real time. 3% annual, increases is not enough. And so again, when you total up the salaries that were spent across players, and that compares to only 8% of the pie, the players are saying, no, 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 we are falling behind. This doesn't make any sense. Look at what the teams are able to spend on coaching salaries.
Yep, because
Look
you
at what the
have.
teams, you see teams investing finally in playing facilities and practice facilities, thank goodness. So the teams, ownership groups understand what it takes. But because we're in this hard cap system, the only thing that's capped are the players. And that just can't be. That just can't be.
Yeah, and to your point about the coaches, I think there's two coaches in the league that make seven figures: Becky Hammond and Nate Tibbetts in Phoenix. But you look at the other salaries of the coaches, and most of them are well over $500,000 a year. And so when you think about what your highest paid player in the WNBA is making,
Yeah,
it's
let's put a number to it. Let's
yeah,
let your audience know, like, a max salary is 250.
Correct.
It's 250. And so when you look across professional sports, how many professional sports leagues out there have this kind of system where the coach makes more than the players?
That does not happen. The only place that happens is in college sports, right? It's like doesn't
And
happen.
and it, and in the W, and where they have seemingly gotten comfortable with it. Although I will say we have new ownership groups. You see it in Phoenix, you see it in Atlanta, you see it in New York. We're still going to call New York new, with the size, of course, who understand and don't feel comfortable with this system, with this model. And so yes, they too are happy, I imagine. They too are happy that we have opted out, because they've got, in New York and Phoenix, they've got NBA teams, and they know the resources and the investment that they're able to pour into and wrap around NBA players. And they feel stifled, and they too feel capped with what they're able to do for their professional athletes who work in the W, who happen to be women, and we got to fix that.